All right. Welcome everyone to Celebrity Josh, the podcast. It is Thursday, September 30th, 2021, 1:34 p.m. And we're going to try to wrap this up before the top of the hour because Professor Pete has stuff to do. I got stuff to do. I've been delayed by the guy cutting hedges outside my basement window, which is stressful, but that's what Pete is an expert on. So maybe he can help me deal with the stress. How's it going?
Good, Josh. Thank you for having me on the show, and I appreciate the time of your listeners.
Ah, well, I wouldn't be as presumptuous as to make listeners plural, but who knows? Maybe this will be the show that catches on. Um, it's exciting. It's been quite a day. I was yesterday. I went to Toronto for a little family reunion, and we hung out with my niece and nephew the day before, and then the minute we got to their house, my sister got a text saying somebody in my nephew's class uh, had been exposed to COVID or something.
Mm.
And then he was pulled out of class, his sister was pulled out of her class, and then today, I guess what happened? I don't know. My sister she went for a rapid test because the kids like to play hockey. We want to know if they were safe. And then she messaged this morning and said, "Oh, they've got COVID." So the nephew has symptoms, the niece doesn't. My sister tested negative, and then my dad was freaking out. He's like, "Oh, you went and get tested." He's like, "You get tested too." I'm like, I'm looking it up. I'm like, I don't think we can get tested yet. And he went all the way to the clinic, and they're like, "Yeah, it's too soon. So we'll just have to live our lives until we see." So that's what's
Mhm.
going on. That's the stress.
Mm.
That's today's stress. There's always new stress.
Of course, of course. And I think, what you have to think about is what aspects of that, for each of us individually, we have to think about what can we control and what we can't control. So, especially, with COVID, that's put a lot of stress on most people over the last, year and a half roughly. And, if you think about it, I know it's hard to do in the moment when you're overly stressed, but if you can think about it as two lists, one list being what you can control and one list of what you can't control, because we tend to, whenever we're faced with something stressful as humans, we tend to worry about all aspects of it. But it's what our energy goes towards, which is so important. And so if we think about COVID, and let's just take a few things for example, things we can't control: our government response, the miscommunication. Heck, we can't even control a person next to us wearing a mask or staying, let's say, 6 feet away from us. But what can we control? We can control washing our hands consistently, wearing our mask. We can control our mindset about this whole situation. And so if we can list out in our what we can control, list out what we can't control, and focus as much of our attention on what we can control, the things that we can affect change in, our stress is going to go way, way down about it, because when we feel like we're in control, when we feel like we can make a difference, that's when our stress level goes down. And if we can shut away or put away as much of the energy on the things that we can't control, we can't affect change on, then it's going to be good, because that's not going to be wasted energy, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and if you were wondering what that noise was, I just realized I can control the light that's coming in from the window. So I decided to close my blinds. So that's one thing I did. And it makes me wonder how much, like how much masks and stuff actually do. I wonder how much of it is sort of giving people the illusion of control. If you wear a mask, you're okay. Like, 'cause otherwise you're just wandering around with nothing to do. So it feels like we've given people things to do: wash your hands, wear a mask. Not that, I mean, not it's completely made up, but I feel like people want some kind of thing, and that's why a lot of people believe in I don't know, horoscopes or good
Mhm,
luck charms. You want something in a
mhm.
world that feels out of control for sure. But
Well, and I think you're right about that. I mean, whether it's horoscopes, or fortune tellers, or whatever it happens to be, it's all about what is it that makes sense to you as an individual, and you have to be able to align whatever your beliefs are with whatever you're hearing. And the challenge is that, each of us has our own opinions about things. And one of the things that works for me in terms of when I come across someone else who may not have the same beliefs as me is I tell myself to respect the other person's perception of the world. The
Yeah.
word there is perception. So I may not agree with it. I just know that that is how they perceive the world. It may or may not be the same as how I perceive the world. I don't have to agree with it. And as I mentioned earlier, I can't control that other person. So, if we get upset about somebody else's opinion, and we start thinking, oh, I need to control this person, that's when we really start getting into, areas where we're just going to stress ourselves out because, the fact of the matter is we can only control ourselves. That's it.
Yeah, and I find that's a lot more comforting to know that. Like for example, my dad doesn't exercise, and I really want him to exercise. I really want him to, and it's been driving me crazy for 20 years. But I realize you can't. I mean, you can do what you can. You can help someone. But I even bought him a treadmill once, and I came to visit again, and it was gone. He had sold it back to the store. So like, there's only so much you can do.
Do you have any kids?
No, and that's
Okay.
that's my great regret, and that's why. What was I going to say? Yeah, I was about to say I wish you would talk to me like 20 years ago, because I used to break up with. There was a girl that liked me, and I'm like, oh, she believes in horoscopes, and because I had taken psychology and learned that they're foolish. And then there was another girl that really liked me. I'm like, oh, she votes conservative. Or I met another girl. It's like, oh, she drives a BMW. That's not good for the environment. So I could have easily had kids with any of these people, but because I was so like, no, I got to control them. And then even one of my great girlfriends when I was like my early 30s. I think she said she sort of maybe believed that the moon landing was fake. And I'm like, what, are you crazy? But I broke up with her. And then I wound up, I was like so stressed out. I actually was getting stomach pains. I was in the hospital. I'm like, I need to deal with this. So I went to therapy. I took like cognitive behavioral therapy. There was a study at the university. I saw a poster. It said, do you stress about everything? I'm like, yes. Or were you worried about everything? Yeah, it was like kind of anxiety. And then, they did some cognitive behavioral therapy. And kind of what I learned in that, I don't remember, it was many weeks, but the gist of it was, what can you control and what you can't. So I knew I can't go back in time and not break up with her stupidly or whatever. But the one thing I decided, here's something I can control. I can mail her a card. Like she told me not to email her anymore or whatever, not to be in contact. But then she did send me out. I was on an email list. She'd started a film festival, a small town film festival, which is my idea. And I was on the list. I'm like, aha, she emailed me. So now I'm allowed to contact her. But I didn't want to email her because then she could email back and say, leave me alone. So I just decided I was going to mail a letter on holidays. I would mail like a St. Patrick's Day card or a Canada Day card. And then eventually I broke her down, and we got back together briefly. And then I was like, oh, I think she started smoking again. I broke up with her again. So anyway, so I never learned my lesson, but the little thing I sort of learned in there was, okay, it helped me to feel like I'm doing what I can. I've reached out to this person in the most I can, and the rest is up to, fate or whatever. So
yeah, well, the reason I asked you about the kids is because those of us who have kids, we realize how hard it is to try and control your kids, because it can be a real challenge. There's times in their life when you have to, of course, when they're very small and they don't know any better. But then when they're getting older and they're starting to tune you out, it can be an extremely frustrating process for a parent. And then you get to your, like you said about your dad selling back the treadmill. Well, that's the other thing is that our parents become our older kids. And so I have an elderly mom who is my oldest kid right now. I have to, financially support her, but I also have to let her be as independent as possible. But I know that that's, not in her best interest, but I had to let that go because, she doesn't have that much time left. And I really wanted her to be happy. and she's most happy staying at home as opposed to being in like an assisted living place. And so I just had to respect that. But I have to put aside my own beliefs. I have to put aside my own frustrations with that, to be able to give her, the quality of life that she wants.
Yeah, that makes sense. It's kind of like, yeah, deciding what you can do. Because I mean, there's so many things I know my parents should do. Like I contacted a personal trainer down the street. And I'm like, oh, maybe he can help my dad. And the trainer's like, well, I can't trick your dad. Because I was saying, I said to the trainer, like, maybe I could tell my dad I paid for 2 months of training. And then if he doesn't go, I don't have to pay. And he's like, well, we can't trick him. Like, but he said, I understand your frustration. I've got my own father. I can't get him to exercise. I'm like, well, okay, even if the personal trainer can't do it. And then, little things like I tried to introduce my mom to Google Photos. I'm like, you'll like this. It'll store your photos. And she's like, no, I don't want my photos all over. I'm like, no, that's not how it works. For 2 years, I was like, you'll like this. And she's like, no. And eventually I got her to do it. I think maybe by showing her my sister did it too. And then she's like, oh, I love it. Now it's her favorite thing. But I'm like, well, why don't you just listen to me? But they particularly don't trust me. Sometimes if I want them to do something, I'll tell my sister to tell them to do it, kind of, because she's the golden child. She's got 2 kids. She's albeit with COVID. See, I have kids that I don't have kids, so they don't have COVID. But I sort of keep making bad choices in my life. Like I mean, I regret breaking up with all my girlfriends. And then 6 years ago, I left my job in copywriting. And then I sold my condo a couple of years ago. So I sort of had things going well. And now I've been living in my parents' basement for a year because I was going to be a digital nomad. And now, so they want me out in a month. They asked my sister to tell me to leave. But, I'll go somewhere. But my dad's like, you should get an apartment in Ottawa, like here, like to be close to us. We can help with your laundry. And I'm like, so you half want me around, but I might go back to Toronto. But yeah, it's frustrating. Like, but if you can get past that and just go, you know what, I can't control other people. It does take a bit burden off you because you can't control other people. But what you can control is yourself. You can force yourself to get up and exercise or work or whatever it is that you want to do. And that's why I find a lot of times I'm always telling people, hey, you should do stand-up comedy or whatever. And I realize I'm projecting on everyone. You should be doing what I should have done. Like I want to be doing stand-up comedy, but I can tell everybody else to do it. It's like ridiculous.
Yeah, the one thing though that you should definitely do too is, we all do this where we look back in our past and we think, I should have done this differently, and that's actually one of the 2 biggest negative stressors that we do to ourselves. It's called rumination. It's basically having guilt about doing something or not doing something in our past. And if we can look back and try and get the positive learnings from those experiences and then let go of the rest, boy, it's a huge game changer because you really, it's true. It really is. I mean, none of us are perfect. None of us are perfect. And, I always refer to myself as, what do I want to do or what am I going to do when I grow up? And because I'm still a kid at heart. I'm in touch with my inner child, and there's things that definitely still trigger me, and a lot of times I don't realize it until after it triggers me, and often it is something from my past that is just something that just you know what I mean? And so there's always always a positive learning from that. And so, there's a reason why you didn't end up with any of your ex-girlfriends. There's a reason why you sold your condo or you left your job or something like that. There's positive reasons for that. And, whatever else you're beating yourself up about, let it go. Let it go. Maybe it's for, you wrote that card for one of them, maybe for the rest of them, you need to write a card or, or write a letter. You don't have to send it. You don't have to send it, but I tell you, it's like journaling. When you start writing out things about it, boy, you can get rid of a lot of that pent up negative emotions that are inside of you.
Yeah, I do want to try that. That's another thing I regret, actually, not writing a diary every day in my life. Because I found an old diary that I kept when I was 14, because somebody gave me a little diary. So I wrote in a page every day for the year, and then it ran out. It never occurred to me buy another diary. It would have been great to go back. but yeah, like I was actually last week, I was like, I'm gonna start making a list of everything I regret in my life just to beat myself up. I don't know, from breaking up with Sarah when I was 18 for absolutely no reason. And then turns out I still 30 years later, I'm 48 now, and she's still like the
Mhm.
perfect girl. And then why did I go into advertising? It's like if I'd known I could have gone into radio, or you know what, I should have done my master's, and then I could have gone to Oxford and Harvard and been a brilliant professor. And I've wasted 20 years in advertising. And why did I break up with Jen, and then the other Jen, and then the third Jen? And then, like I just every minute I think of a new regret. Oh my God, I forgot about that girl. Why was I rude to her? Because I kept thinking, oh, there was an endless stream of girls. And now it's like, okay, I feel like I figured it out, but you can't get that time back. Now I'm like, oh, right. That's why I should have married Jan when I was 22, because now I would have a 26-year-old kid. But if I start now, it's just, yeah. So, I mean, what you're talking about, rumination, it's torture. It's awful. And what I try to do every day now is like I film a little summary of my day at the end of the day, but that's
Mhm.
just have a record of my day. But I don't know. I don't know what the point is. There's not much point other than exposing myself to the world and giving people fodder to attack me with.
Oh, I wouldn't say that. I think if it feels right to you inside, I would say that that's perfectly fine. But you
Yeah.
got to forgive yourself, my friend. You
Yeah.
do. You
There,
have to forgive yourself.
there was this girl, Julie, who really liked me in second year university. And she wrote on my hand, just let go. She's like, that's your mantra. Just let go. Just stop. Because I was holding so tight, like just like I am now, everything. It's like,
Mhm.
this and that. And so I keep telling, like, the one thing that seems to work for me every time I start going, oh my God, why didn't I marry that girl or become a professor? Like I keep going, okay, that's a lot of privilege that's what I'm worried about, that my life isn't that perfect. And I keep thinking like, okay, well, Chadwick Boseman, who played Black Panther, he died at 44 of cancer, even though he's a Hollywood star.
Right.
So something can happen. Or there's people hanging off planes in Afghanistan trying to, again, like they would love to have the luxury to go, I wish I hadn't dropped my laptop 10 years ago because I lost a bunch of digital photos, or I wish I had kept a diary every year so I could go back and remember, like, so it's people have worse problems, obviously. And all it takes is getting COVID or cancer to think, oh God, yeah, you know what? I didn't have it so bad. I'll go back to that, please.
Mhm. Well,
um,
and it's a good point that you say there too, because too many of us, I would say the vast majority of us, we take our health for granted. And when you think about that, yeah, sure, you take your health for granted, but then think about the last time that you might have been really sick with the flu, let's say. And did you feel like you wanted to do anything other than lie in bed? Probably not.
right.
And when we're in that kind of state, we have no energy for whatever our career is. We have no energy for our loved ones, nothing. And so I always try and remind everyone that we have this gift of health. And, and if you lose that health, nothing else is going to matter, because everything is going to come secondarily to how you feel um, on that particular day.
Yeah, like a year ago, my aunt got diagnosed with pancreatic cancer, and then she
Mm,
just passed away, like, I guess last month.
I'm
And it's like,
sorry.
yeah, and it's like there's nothing else. That's it, like that for that year. There's not a lot else you're doing,
Right.
and so it's funny because, like, yeah, like, am I fully taking advantage or grateful for my health? It's like, I guess, but on the other hand, you don't want to be always like, oh, thank God I don't have cancer, because then you aren't appreciating what you have, because when you do get something, you're like, well, why was I worried all the time? So it's hard to know how to. Of course, you take for granted your health, but I guess maybe in a way it's good that you take, because that means you're not having to worry about it. But yeah, I tell young people and everybody should get out and do things while you can, like just travel or walk, or don't just sit and watch TV unless that's what you want to do. I guess I don't know what the secret of life is,
Well,
but
I could tell you that from my experience, that yes, you want to take advantage of going out for a walk, doing whatever you have. But the fact of the matter is, our bodies are going to tell us constantly if we're stressed. And if we start listening to it, that's when we'll actually be able to affect change. And you can avoid some serious complications later, because basically, if you ask doctors um, whether or not there's a direct correlation between stress and chronic disease, they'll probably say no, because there's an intermediary phase. And the intermediary phase is cellular inflammation. So any kind of major stress that we have, as we're continuously letting ourselves be stressed, That causes cellular inflammation. It's the cellular inflammation that causes the chronic disease. For me, it caused my diabetes, even though no one in my family has it. Um, for others that I know had got cancer, heart disease, etc. Those are the kind of things that we have to be careful about. And our bodies are going to tell us ahead of time whether or not we are taking care of ourselves. So, if you think about it, we typically are going to have both mental and physical signs of stress. So, mentally, it'll be something like a lack of concentration instead of being able to focus. It might be mood swings going from happy to sad or angry at a moment's notice. It might have panic attacks about something that might be happening. It might be prescription drug or alcohol abuse. Those are all things that are indicators that we're mentally stressed. Physically, it might be something like, getting a cold every month instead of like once a season, or back and shoulder stiffness, because that's a classic one, especially for those of us who sit at a desk most of the day, because when we're stressed, we tend to hunch over, and that puts a lot of pressure on our shoulder and our back. Maybe getting not enough sleep or excessive sleep, that's an indicator you're physically stressed. Digestive disorders where no amount of Pepto-Bismol is going to take care of it, or you're reaching for the Excedrin bottle every day instead of occasionally because you're getting headaches constantly, and weight fluctuations, either gaining or losing weight rapidly. Those are all indicators that you're physically stressed. In fact, right before I was diagnosed with stress-induced diabetes, I lost 30 pounds in 30 days. And at first, I was in my mid 40s when this happened. At first, I thought, oh, this is fantastic. I hadn't lost weight since my 20s.
Yeah.
And I wasn't doing any special diet. I wasn't doing any special exercise, just the normal stuff that I do. And then after that 30th pound came off, I thought, I better get this checked out. And oh, ding, 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 stress-induced diabetes. So our bodies will tell us. The problem is that if we don't listen and we continuously stress ourselves out for an extended period of time, which is what I did, what ends up happening is that the weakest link in our body will break. And for whatever reason, mine, the pancreas, was it.
Mm. And so that was a pancreas diabetes kind of thing you had? Or?
Well, so diabetes is where the pancreas isn't producing enough of your natural insulin. Right. So basically it shut down.
Yeah. So then we've only got a couple of minutes left. So maybe this can be the first of several episodes where we discuss this, but I'll comment that when you said Pepto-Bismol, so when I broke up with the first gen and then was trying to get her back and then, you know what? I eventually did get her back, and then I broke up with her again. And then we were sort of chatting again. I was like, maybe we can go for a drink. She said, no, I just got to let you know I got engaged. I'm like, got engaged? Blah. I remember that time I was at my sister's place and I had to how did I get home? I got a friend to pick me up she drove me home because I couldn't be alone, all this stuff. And then there was this really cute girl who lived in my neighborhood that invited me over. I was hanging out with her and we were getting along. And then suddenly I got the stomach pain. I'm like, oh, I feel like, I don't know, like fat in my stomach. So I had to go home. And then another girl wanted to come over and have a hot tub. And I'm like, oh, and then my stomach started hurting more. And I was like curled up on the floor. And eventually I was getting these stomach pains all the time, like just violent pain. I was like, am I allergic to gluten? What's going on? And eventually I wound up in the hospital. I went to the doctor and she's like, what's the pain out of 10? I'm like, it's 10. I can't, so I had to go to emergency. I wound up getting an endoscopy and a colonoscopy and all this stuff. And at the end of it all, the doctor's like, yeah, there's nothing wrong with you. You just need to just be less stressed and maybe eat some fiber. And then it eventually went away. But I realize now it was all because I should have been with this girl and my body was telling me, marry this girl. This is your chance to have kids and whatever. And you shouldn't be with these other girls. And we're going to stop you from being with other girls. And that's crazy that literally, I didn't know what, and it was nothing. It was nothing but this like gas, and I had to rub it was just, and so I was chugging Pepto-Bismol all the time, trying to figure out what was wrong with me, kind of thing. So yes, you are right. But now we've got Professor Pete Alexander, and on your screen there, for those of you who are listening, it says effective stress relief in just a couple of minutes per day. Got stress? Visit your website. Why is your name Professor Pete? Like,
Because I do have a PhD and I have taught classes, and I'm currently an adjunct professor. So yep. So I'm a legit.
Ah.
But my name is pretty common. So Professor Pete Alexander helps me stand out a little bit more from all the other Pete Alexanders out there.
Oh, for sure. I'm fortunate there's no other Josh Racklesses. So and no one would want that name either. They wouldn't want to be confused with me.
Oh,
And that's my other great regret, that I realize now I should have done a master's and a PhD, and I could have been a professor, and that should have been. And so I've been looking into that now. 2 years ago, I started research. I'm like, how can I get? But I could have already had a master's now. 2 years later, but I was like, oh, I'm
you
too old to do it.
you got to forgive yourself. You
Yeah.
got to forgive yourself because you're beating yourself up way too much.
Correct. Well, that's the summary of the day. So yeah, go to petealexander.com for more stress relief. I feel like I've learned a lot today, and hopefully you can come on. And I remember when we were first talking by email or whatever, I said, oh, I've got stress, you can help me out. So you're my kind of guy.
All right, Josh. Well, thank you for having me on the show. I really appreciate your time.
Thanks. And thanks for finally curing my stress.
All right, great. Thanks. I'm glad I could help.
All right. Bye.
Bye-bye.